Hey everybody, welcome to the Otherz podcast. I am your host, Stephen Penny. We've been away for a while, apart from the kind of very random podcast we put out, I think it was last week or the week before, with some recommendations while everybody's stuck at home and self-isolating. But we are back with our kind of usual schedule now, hopefully, and our usual content, unless you would like some more random stuff. So this week, we are going to talk all things Daft Punk, as well as all of the news and updates that we've had from probably the last 6 months since I last recorded one of these podcasts properly. So there's plenty to go through. And to help me go through that, another new guest this week, all the way from way out west in Oregon, Clayton Davis. How you doing, man?
Good, how are you?
Really good, thank you, really good. Just dealing with this kind of self-isolation thing, trying to keep busy, trying to stay away from people, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So let's get into these Daft Punk tracks, I guess, that we're going to discuss here. So I've grouped both of them together here. Probably would have normally done them one at a time, but Blurred Lines came in between them, and we've already done Blurred Lines, so it made sense to kind of group these two tracks up together and kind of get them both out of the way. So the guest's prerogative, Clayton, you can pick which one we start with. So your choice is either Lose Yourself to Dance or Get Lucky. Which one do you fancy first?
I say let's talk about Lose Yourself to Dance, because I feel it's one that's not talked about much except among Pharrell fans, because it's not the most popular one.
Let me go through the numbers quickly then for this one and all the kind of stats and whatnot, and then we'll get into it. This was actually the second single released from Ram after Get Lucky, released on the 13th of August 2013. That's 7 years ago, and that makes me feel so old now.
Yeah.
God. 151 million YouTube views so far, with an unofficial fan version of the video getting 22 million views. What else have we got here? Hit #1 song in South Korea, and as well on the US Hot Dance Club Songs, whatever random chart that is in the US. Bar that, it didn't chart massively elsewhere. Obviously, Get Lucky, I think, stole all of the limelight, and we'll get to that in a bit. But from my understanding, Lose Yourself to Dance was the second single, but it was meant to be the actual breakout track of the album. It's the one that they kind of really expected to be the massive track, and unfortunately it was somewhat overshadowed by Get Lucky. So we had a video that was shot at the same time as the Get Lucky video. A trailer debuted for this track at the 2013 MTV VMAs. The video came out on the 16th of September. Produced by Daft Arts and directed by Daft Punk, Warren Fu, Paul Hahn, and Cedric Hervé. That's pretty much all the stats. So let's get into the video and the track. Clayton, I'll let you start. You can give me your thoughts and observations on this one.
Well, I was listening to the song, and the thing I thought interesting about it because it's a fairly slower paced song, which is very, compared to Get Lucky and some of the other songs, it's interesting that would be the kind of dance song, but they were obviously going for a very much a 70s disco, club type theme, which I guess, these days people are used to these very fast paced EDM type dance songs, and this was more of a, when I listened to it, it's more of a chill song. It's more of a, like, this is something kind of anybody could dance to. But I was just listening to that, and I thought that was interesting that they, that you have this whole theme. But I think we have the lyrics, I know you don't get to take a break this often, so it's almost like, it's almost like a theme. Like, I felt had a very, the song Off the Wall by Michael Jackson. like had very similar to that. Like it's hey, you've had a long week, and you get to go to the club, but maybe your energy is not there to just stamp out and go, a full 100. And I don't know if that was purposeful, but I feel like both these songs are very interesting, and they're one of the few songs that features Pharrell that he did not produce himself, or Chad did not produce. So I felt he was very much in kind of his channeling Michael, who, is an idol of his and someone he wanted to produce for. And I feel you very much have that in the video, very much of a late 70s, early 80s type of Michael Jackson off the wall feel.
I hadn't really thought about that previously watching it, but now you say it, that kind of theme of the song. And I think also thinking back to, I haven't watched the video in about a week or so, but thinking back to the video, they've got those kind of like sort of sequin suit jackets on, haven't they? Which is very Michael Jackson-esque, let's say.
Yeah, and I think it was, Pharrell was referring to that song, was very much like, he said she felt it was more like 1980s, like 1985 than the 70s. And I mean, look at the video, and you look at the video for, I think it's Don't Stop Till You Get Enough. It's like very, very similar, but it's almost like, from where he describes it and how he recorded, he was kind of jet lagged. And I think that was, at least for Get Lucky, in that I think this was really, Daft Punk knew what they wanted exactly from this, and they kind of just carried it and knew that Pharrell would provide what was kind of needed in that, being able to kind of channel that. Again, you never know with, if that was intentional, but I feel like it was really, these songs are just really interesting because it comes in the middle of an era which I felt the 2010s were very much, 2010, sort of late 2000s were very much a revival of the 80s. And it's interesting to have these songs that are very 70s-ish just pop right out, but still become so popular because they weren't quite what was going on at the time. But I think Daft Punk was looking to provide something different, while you have, these kind of changes in hip hop that are moving away from kind of real, I don't want to say real artistry, but you have a lot of the SoundCloud effect of people wanting to, churn out kind of the same thing over and over again. So yeah, it was refreshing, very interesting for me to hear these songs that are featuring Pharrell, but that he was secondary with, that he wasn't on the boards with. I don't know, how did you feel about that? Do you think that was that's a significant, that shows his significance in the industry beyond just being a producer, and kind of his song featuring Pharrell?
Yeah, definitely. It's funny you say that, because at the same time, you look at both the videos, and he is still, the video is based around them performing this song kind of, on a stage, this kind of very futuristic, spaceship-looking club environment type thing. But he still takes kind of center stage in the video, with Daft Punk to the side of him, behind him, kind of Nile Rodgers off to the side as well a little bit. So obviously they still leverage that kind of star power of Pharrell, but I think at the same time, yes, it is very much more of a Daft Punk song, and I've been trying to listen to a bit more Daft Punk again recently. And you go back and you look at all of their stuff, and I think the vast majority of their albums, while a lot of stuff sounds quite futuristic and forward-thinking, there's always those kind of constant throwbacks to that sort of 70s funk and dance stuff and 80s electro music. And as you mentioned a moment ago, you know, I think Pharrell and Daft Punk have talked about, you know, that they felt it was more of a David Bowie's 80 kind of track, but I definitely get more of a kind of 70s feel from it, both sonically and visually with the video itself as well. And you know, the kind of the setting, the lighting, the way the kind of dancers are dressed, the way even they're dressed as well. Like say, there is that kind of Michael Jackson vibe and throwback to a certain extent as well. So there's a mixture of different things in there, but I think in terms of the track in the video, I think they pull it off very well. I think there's always the chance when you kind of do tracks that are a sort of throwback to an older era, and you're trying to kind of reference the 70s or emulate a 70s kind of sound, there's a chance that it can sound a bit fake or sound a bit muddled if you're using other influences as well. But I think this track works very, very well, no matter what they may or may not have been referencing in terms of whether it came from the 70s, the 80s, Bowie, or anyone else basically.
Well, and I think it showed too how Pharrell's singing talents have evolved too. I mean, he would have been one to say, like, when he did Frontin' about, he's critical of himself of his singing, but this, I mean, because those are, especially that song, those high notes, they're not easy to hit, but it's obviously something where I don't know if he would have been willing to do it, so many years ago, if he would have been that confident in his singing abilities. But I think it goes to show how much he's practiced, and two, there's a certain freedom in all of it, because like he was saying, he was into the same thing at the time. He was listening to Nile Rodgers, and he was just like, hey, if you just want me to play the tambourine. So I get this on the track, I get this sense of sort of freedom for him, of he doesn't have to worry about kind of the full composition of it himself and all that comes with it. So that carries over very well for the whole message of the song of kind of, lose yourself, have fun, type of thing. But, yeah. And two, I mean, I've been a Daft Punk fan since the late 90s. My favorite type of electronica is French electronica, which Pharrell is also very into, having worked with, Cassius, and, you have some Justice remix. But I think too, you have what you don't have in a lot of other things. You have a very theater thing, which of course, all the way up to them accepting the awards is the robots. Because obviously Daft Punk is two humans, but throughout all the interviews and everything, it's, there's a sense of fun of phrasing it as, they're robots from another planet and they come down here to be nice and chill with us. And I kind of liked what he said about sort of almost taking from a parallel universe where maybe, this era of the 70s are back in full swing, because it really, yeah, like you said, it really didn't fit in the paradigm of what was going on. But I think maybe that's why it was so successful. It won awards, nominated for awards, because it was so kind of odd in that period. I mean, do you agree? Because I don't remember a whole lot of 70s revival really going on at the time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what Daft Punk do themselves very, very well, as I kind of mentioned, alluded to earlier, is they always have that kind of throwback feel to their tracks, but they always do it very, very well. So I think even if they're at the time, even if you do have other artists trying to do similar things, I think Daft Punk will always stand head and shoulders above other artists, other producers. They've done it for years. They do it brilliantly, which is why, you know, when there's a new Daft Punk album or single rumoured, or a tour or a festival appearance, you know, it turns into the biggest thing in the music industry. You know, they've been around for years, yet, you know, you can go online and every day people are talking about rumours of them turning up here, turning up there, working in the studio with so-and-so, working on something else. And again, that ties into that whole kind of, you know, the robots. I was going to say branding. I don't know if it is kind of branding, but it kind of gives them an enigma almost. And I find it slightly endearing, but also slightly strange how, like when Pharrell talks in interviews about them and refers to them as, you know, the robots. I kind of think, is that something they ask people to do because it kind of ties in with, you know, their own sort of brand and marketing, or is that something he's just kind of chosen to kind of word it and refer to them? It's a very strange thing, I find.
Oh, I think it's totally part of their brand, just because I haven't been to one of their concerts, but I've had at least one friend, and it's that you don't see them. You see them in their robot suits with their robot heads behind the boards. And they've been doing that consistently since the late 2000s. I mean, it was, you have the fact that they were started doing that already with their album before that, but you know, they had 7 years between that album and the previous one. And I don't think anybody thought they were coming out with that. But I think it's something, obviously, that Pharrell too is into that type of theater, and it seems, I mean, just the fact that when they are at the award show, they're wearing, you know, the helmets. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very much part of their brand that I don't know if even they could or want to change it, but I think they're like a lot of artists. People forget there's a lot of artists who are, you know, very ego driven. They want the attention, but then there's some who they don't want it to be about them. They want it to be about the music. And I think that's part of their brand, is like, you can ask people, who are the members of Daft Punk? Most people won't be able to say unless they look it up. You know, you have to look for, okay, what do these guys actually look like? Okay, they're French dudes, you know, because they have this whole theme that I think, that's something they asked, and Pharrell clicks on, being, you know, a big sci-fi guy, and these are robots who came from another space and time or planet, and they came down here to give us this music. I think that kind of adds to the sense of Daft Punk wants this to be about, you know, fun. And I think that's something you find in a lot of French electronica too, is it's very much this stage thing, this theater thing. It's about having fun and breaking loose. Not that, of course, not that all, you know, other electronica is not, but it's very much in that. French electronica is very influenced, I feel, by that kind of 70s, almost new disco. And so I think just adding that to it helps. But I think, that's just been their brand for a while, and I think it works. I don't know.
Most definitely, yeah. But I think there's also that kind of allure, I can't even say the word allure, and a mystique behind it, because you don't see them out in public that often, you know, as kind of normal people. Obviously, photos of them surface every now and again at certain, you know, industry events and things like that. But because they have this kind of robot persona, you know, when a new album comes out, they don't necessarily do a lot. They don't do any press really, unless it's kind of pre-released, you know, kind of off-camera written interviews or statements that they release. So again, I think that kind of adds to a lot of it, a lot of the kind of build up, a lot of the kind of the uncertainty of, will they release something else again? Will they tour? Will they appear here or there? Because when they don't have an album out or a track out, you don't really see or hear anything of them. I think with, Pharrell and a lot of other big artists that are popular at the moment, they pop up every now and again. You see pictures of them in a studio or at an event or wherever it may be. With Daft Punk, you don't really see anything. Now, I know I have sort of read some of the kind of, the rumours and stuff here and there where, if they attend events, they have the organisers of the events sign kind of NDAs and agreements that they won't have their pictures taken and all this kind of stuff. So I'm sure they're out there, amongst the kind of other celebrities in the kind of music industry, more than we probably realise. But, we don't, as normal people, sort of see any of that or have access to that. So I think that adds to a lot of that kind of as I say, sort of mystique about them, and that kind of ties into the whole sort of brand and the marketing side of things as well, which is very clever on their part.
Yeah, and I think it's you see that they are producers, and producers are typically people who like to stay kind of behind the scenes. I mean, you have with the Neptunes, Chad's not the one who gets a lot of attention, and he likes that because he's got his family. He's interested in staying behind the scenes, letting Pharrell take the stage. I mean, it's a lot of people, you can ask them if they know who the Neptunes are. Some people just don't, Pharrell. But I think a lot of these producers don't necessarily want all that attention. You have, of course, the producer songwriters. A lot of them who are out in center stage. But I mean, it's similar to a lot of these other groups. I mean, Gorillaz has the same thing when they, tour. Typically, they would, hide behind a screen and have into cartoons, kind of images play for them. I did not know that about the kind of NDA stuff. That's kind of interesting, but I see it as too. They didn't have to do a whole lot of marketing for this too. I think in part because they had 2 songs featuring Pharrell, one of the most famous entertainers at the time. That was sort of the hook. I mean, they also got Julian Casablancas on the album too, but a lot of other people I hadn't heard of. It was very much an education for me. I mean, I'm 35 now, but I didn't grow up learning a lot about that part of 70s and 80s. So I felt it was really interesting that it took off in the way it did, because it took off for a lot of people who weren't knowledgeable about a lot of that stuff. And I think it's very interesting that such retro songs hit so many audiences. You have, and I think in large part it has to do with Pharrell. You have the younger people who listen to his stuff, then you have the older people it kind of clicks with, and that's not easy to do. But I think that's part of why, I mean, award shows are all largely political, but I think part of why they, were kind of deemed that way, because it hit all those demographics. And I think they knew that, probably had some type of planning in that way. But I think they would probably first say it wouldn't have been possible without Pharrell. I mean, you have them on stage, they're not talking, it's Pharrell talking. So I think that's also excellent marketing. And two, they've created something that allows them to do touring differently as well. Approach how they, perform too, because they're playing different stuff. But I don't know though if they lost audience from that, but I think they probably gained a lot more, because it's pretty different from their album before, which is very club oriented.
Yeah, for sure. And as you mentioned there as well, I think it shows the kind of pull and power, and I guess the respect of Daft Punk, the fact that you have somebody like Pharrell and Nile Rodgers as well, who is massive in the industry. He's revered. Actually doing the press and the publicity for the two singles. If you look at pretty much any other song in the world, the featuring artist is not the artist that does the promo stuff. The people that do the promo are the artists whose album it is on. But again, I think that shows the kind of power of Daft Punk, that they can get the likes of Pharrell, who had his his own stuff to promote at the time. This is around the time of as I say, what's it called, Blurred Lines was released in between these two tracks. It was kind of just after Happy and all that sort of stuff. So it's not like he's got spare time on his hands to be doing this as well. But he's out there doing promo stuff, doing interviews for these tracks, as is Nile Rodgers as well, who is constantly in the studio, constantly touring. So it shows the power of Daft Punk, and I think that the power and probably the expectation internally of the two tracks as well.
Yeah, and I mean too, something that occurred to me the more I've listened to the Neptunes is Daft Punk being an influence, because I think they're around the same age, but the Neptunes were still doing kind of a lot of art. They were just beginning kind of in 96, 97 when kind of Daft Punk hit the scene, and that's when they're still doing very much kind of the Teddy Riley stuff of producing R&B, but I find just it's obvious how much they're influenced by that too, especially that French electronica. And then I think that was kind of, being starting producers, they're doing remixes and doing that harder, better, faster, stronger remix. I mean, that was the first time it was obvious how much too Daft Punk really liked Pharrell. They wanted more than just a remix. They wanted like a redo. They wanted, that remix is a redo of the whole song. You have them adding, lyrics that weren't, really in there. And
this whole kind of Pharrell hooks and verses in there almost.
Yeah. And that was, I mean, because they were doing a lot of remixes, there were some remixes like that, like the Prince's remix, The Greatest Romance Ever Told, and you had similar with Air with Don't Be Light. That was pretty much complete reworking. So I mean, they were already connected in that way. So I think it was just probably a logical conclusion for Daft Punk to see, okay, well, we had this success, there's this mutual admiration, and just the fact that they were on the same wavelength of listening to that same music. I mean, but they're all guys who were born in the 70s, to recall. So they also, but it's like too, knowing they were born in the 70s means really they were coming up in the 80s. And that's what I feel like they were really hitting on, sort of that disco kind of R&B that was kind of, still in the 80s before it kind of hit sort of the glam rock. That it was very much that Michael Jackson, Prince, kind of Bowie, that was still kind of refining itself. And so I think it was very much probably for them, a very much a nostalgia thing, because it just feels like listening to it, watching the videos, they're having just a lot of enjoyment, a lot of fun with it, rather than, because neither of them at this point, 2013, really need to be making music to gain traction in their career.
Yeah,
all their careers established. Daft Punk could not put anything out, and just tour, sell out. Pharrell has making tons from producing. So there was no force. None of them felt force behind it. And I think it's just, you have you have this, it's an admiration, it's a nostalgia thing. And I think that's pretty interesting too, because I don't think that happens a whole lot in an industry that can be kind of cutthroat and, you know, we have favors and stuff like that. That it was none of that. It was very much of a kind of like a friends and mentors jamming type thing.
Yeah, that's the feeling I get with the various things they've worked on in the past. It never seems like it's, you know, the label says we have to work with so-and-so, or, you know, we've done this in the past, now we have to work with this person. You know, I think when they come together, it's always very organic, let's say, and it seems very, very natural and relaxed and unforced. And again, that's probably part of the appeal to the songs when they actually, you know, come out as well. They have that feeling to them.
Well, and isn't N.E.R.D, or at that time N.E.R.D was signed to Virgin? Or
yes, yeah, they were, yeah.
And so Daft Punk has also switched from Columbia to Virgin, so that, you know, there's also, that makes it a lot easier. I mean, not that typically producers have to restrict in that way, but, you know, I think often it's preferable you work with somebody who's on the same label. That occurred to me too, that there could be, you know, symbiosis kind of there, less contracts you have to work around.
And you also mentioned a moment ago the Neptunes remix of what's it called?
Harder, Better, Faster.
That's it. Yeah, one of the worst intros of any song ever, but one of the best remixes of any song ever, I have to say. I think once I get over that initial intro, it's a brilliant track. And like you say, it is almost a completely new and different track, not just a remix. But I have to say, I hate that intro. I really hate it.
But at the time, yeah, and at the time, like that would have been the case, you know, so many years later. But they were both. But it was at the time where, you know, they knew what they were doing in terms of course, Pharrell and Chad wanted to do the Neptunes as a group, and that just, they weren't, you know, none of the record labels were going to have it at the time. Because it was just, you know, you guys are too weird. We don't know how to market you. So they're like, okay, we're producers, and like a lot of producers are doing, you know, Timbaland. They have people say the name on the track, so they were kind of very, very much going through that. So part of it was Daft Punk helping the Neptunes build their brand name. I thought it was kind of fun, but I like how it kind of splits up, but of course that track is pretty different than what came later. I mean, because it's more kind of high octane or more fast paced, but it still has the Daft Punk brand of, this is about fun. This is not about us. This is about fun. But I don't know. I kind of like the intro in that it's like, you know, they're excited to be working together. But yeah, I mean, you have the fact that Daft Punk was a lot more well known at the time, and probably if it came a few years later, they wouldn't need that intro because it's already established.
Should we move on to Get Lucky?
Yeah.
All right, I'll reel off some absolutely ridiculous statistics for this one. Released on the 19th of April 2013, as I mentioned, the first single off of the album, reached the top 10 in 32 countries across the world and sold more than 9.3 million copies. It won Record of the Year and Best Pop Duo / Group Performance at the Grammys, which also included a performance with Stevie Wonder, I think as we kind of earlier alluded to. And there's also that rehearsal video that I think you can find on YouTube most places, where even in the rehearsal where everyone's dressed casually, Daft Punk still have the helmets on, which I find quite amusing. The album version is, you know, over 6 minutes long with a 4-minute radio edit. The official audio, I'm going to say video in air quotes on YouTube, has nearly 500 million views at this point. A fan-made album version, which is kind of made from cuts of the kind of teaser trailers, has, you know, over 8 million views so far. As mentioned, there's no kind of real official music video to this. I think Nile Rodgers kind of stated a few times in the past that, as we already mentioned, Lose Yourself to Dance was meant to be the kind of standout single. So only some teasers were made for Get Lucky, and that's kind of 2 15-second promo slots that were shown during SNL and at Coachella. And that's what kind of makes up these fan videos, where you can kind of see the same bits looped over and over again. I did like the fact that I've read in an interview somewhere, I think it was with Nile Rodgers, or maybe it was Pharrell, I can't remember which, but he was talking about the song itself. It took nearly 18 months to make, and it nearly didn't get made, nearly didn't get finished due to lots of different scheduling conflicts and people kind of missing each other when they should have been meeting up and all this kind of thing. So it goes to show kind of how much effort and time gets put into, from an outsider's view, is quite a kind of almost simplistic kind of song.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not abnormal for these hits. I mean, what that triggered my mind was go to Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys. That was recorded during the Pet Sounds era, which that was the album, of course, very influential now, but it was not a commercial success back then. But Good Vibrations, it cost, I think, $60,000, recorded in 4 different studios. So, which that's a lot of money today. So this is more, I think it didn't, and of course that was a huge single, but I think in this case it wasn't so much. I got the sense it wasn't so much that they devoted so much time to it as more it was a lot of scheduling. I mean, you have Nile, then you have Pharrell's busy schedule, but I think too it shows just the time period of 7 years between the last album and this. Is it something they really wanted devoted a lot of time and energy to, and it's something that they knew even if it didn't pay off, this was, I felt like sometimes this album was very much their dedication to what they grew up on. Maybe not sure whether it would take off, but again, it's like not needing to do it for money. It's very much kind of a love affair thing, and I think it just came at the right time. You had the right time of Pharrell's at really not peak of his career, but really at a large peak with all that going on. It is interesting that there is no real music video to it, and I almost wonder if that's because it's one of those things when you're in the song, your imagination can take shape. And I think it's one of those songs where it's like this, even though Lose Yourself to Dance was probably meant at the club one, the Get Lucky is probably the one where people, want to dance to. And when you're kind of in that, you're immersed in the feeling of the song more than anything. And yeah, it is interesting. Just making music myself, it's interesting when I share it with people what songs they like compared to what I liked. But I think they probably knew when it was coming out that this would be a big one. I personally really like the official remix. I felt it's more like kind of reworking, but I really like kind of how they chop that up in a very Daft Punk way, because it's the whole structure of the song is different than a lot of the kind of electronic and DJ ways they did things.
Yeah, and just touching on that point where you mentioned about there was kind of no video and stuff shot for this. It with 500 million streams of just the audio track on YouTube, it makes me wonder how much bigger this track kind of could have been if you didn't necessarily have blurred lines and parallel as well, and if you did have an official music video and you had that additional let's say reach via other channels where you would see videos. Because obviously, you know, TV shows and things like that rely on music videos aren't gonna play an audio version with a static image there. So it makes me wonder how big, it could have been. And I think once it came out, I think they probably realised, oh, this is actually going to be the big one now. But from what I've kind of read, I really don't think they had a clue beforehand, unfortunately. And and that may be down to them personally. That may be a kind of, I don't know, let's say the relevant marketing teams at their label dropping the ball maybe slightly. I don't know, but it's in hindsight it's crazy to imagine this song could have been, you know, even bigger than it was. And it's one of those songs, it's kind of up there with, I talked about this when we did the Happy episode. You know, Happy is a great pop track. It's a slick, brilliantly produced and written track, but it's one of those where I've heard it so many times that if it comes on, I will generally just zone out now. I don't pay attention to it at all. And Get Lucky is kind of one of those tracks to a certain extent as well. If it comes on in the background, it's just like, I've heard this like, you know, 300 million times already. I don't need to listen to it again. And I really don't think they expected that at all.
Well, and I almost wonder if, I don't know if it was intentional, but we're now in the era of what was happening in the 70s. In the 70s, there was no real music videos. Music videos didn't really happen until MTV. And now we're kind of the back in that. People do music videos, but I don't regularly watch music videos. A lot of people, you can find them on YouTube, but by 2013, MTV VH1 had shifted to reality shows. A lot of people are not getting their music from music videos, I think. So I think part of it maybe worked in that way that, most people are getting streams, they're getting recommendations, they're hearing it somewhere, they're hearing it at the club, they're hearing it at the store. Friends are sending in, hey, you got to listen to this. So that marked a difference to where you don't need a music video anymore to market yourself, and to established artists. It's funny too when I think about the Get Lucky music video. My thing goes is, Simply Lose Yourself to Dance works for it too, but I feel it almost works because it's very much like the subject of the song. It's very much kind of like a makeout song. It's a makeout and dance with your partner. You're not concerned with what visuals are attached to it. Because we're just, I think about other songs that, have been big, like in the past decade, like Uptown Funk. Probably not many people have actually seen that video. There's a video, it's sort of popular, but it wasn't really a thing compared to the song, which was at one point, like, I think just from the streams making Mark Ronson like $800,000 a week. It was just so huge. I think that's what we're in now, and I think it's too, that one thing I like about the lyrics is it stirs your imagination to, you see the scenes, and I think that's something Pharrell is very good at. I think both of them are very good at. I just, at least how my imagination where you just kind of immersed in that story. And there is sort of like a story of, like, I feel very much kind of like teenage love that's being told throughout a lot of the album. That I think it takes you back to a time where we listened to music without the visuals. And that was, pretty much the time period of it as influence of late 70s, early 80s, before we had all these videos for the hook.
Yeah, I partly agree there. I think, we definitely at least consume things slightly differently, or fairly differently now. I remember sort of in the late 80s, early 90s, when there was like a new Michael Jackson video that was going to be, premiered on TV at some point. It was, it was an event. It was, ask my mum to stay up late to watch it and stuff, and watch it when it kind of came out. And you'd record it on the VHS and then play it back over and over again to kind of rewatch it. But I think the videos themselves, I think they still do play a fairly important part of the kind of the marketing and the tying the song or giving the song kind of more exposure, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say. I know what you mean in terms of this song. It doesn't necessarily need a video. It's obviously it's done very, very well without it, just based on the quality of the song. But like Uptown Funk, for example, I think that has like 1.2 billion views or something on YouTube now, 1.3 billion, something ridiculous. And that is that's a mixture of people actually watching the video. Now, I know when that came out, my kid was probably 4 years old, 5 years old, something like that, and he watched that video 100 times. More than 100 times, probably 100 times a day. And then it's also a mixture of, kind of teenagers that will open YouTube, press play on a video that they like just because they like the song, not the video itself, and then just let YouTube kind of play in the background while they do other things. There's also that element to it as well. And I think that's where a lot of Get Lucky's views in air quotes on YouTube probably came from, just it being recommended and playing in the background a lot of the time. But
I think it was that time period, because now we're coming to, I think, an emerge. Now that especially YouTube was, I think at that time YouTube hadn't been taken over by Google, but now you're having more of that mesh between the visuals and the audio, and you're having more of that music video thing now. That kind of like, for example, Pharrell's company, I Am Other Entertainment, it's an entertainment company because it's no longer, it's not just about the music anymore, it's about the kind of convergence. And that's something, when I was a journalist, we talked about convergence of written word, audio, podcast, video. It's kind of coming into play and how it meshes with movies. So it's like now there's kind of, I feel, a resurgence. You've got, MTV actually has a channel now where it just shows music videos. So I think that's pretty exciting. I just feel at the time like I think it could have worked because there is the music video component, but there is people are. I don't think it would have worked if Get Lucky was like not probably a dance, pop song, obviously, but I think in that way it really worked. And two, you have the allure of a duo who is very. Then I thought because the duo is very visually based. I mean, just their concerts are a whole experience. It's not just them performing; it's a whole experience. So I think too, in that way, it was really the right time as well. But could it have happened that way without the success of Blurred Lines and Happy, which are very, they have music videos, and Happy, of course, has this whole undertaking of 24 hours of the videos. Yeah, I don't know. I think it was probably not intended, but it was the right time thing. So
yeah, and also it probably doesn't apply to Get Lucky directly itself, but there's also this other component to a music video from around that time up until now, and will be for the foreseeable future, and that's the kind of the fan interaction side of things as well, which then helps promote it and get a buzz around the world. And we saw that with Happy, with people doing their own versions of the Happy video kind of all over the world. And we see it now with like I say, Get Lucky was probably going to be massive no matter what, even if they didn't expect it to be that massive. But we see, like, I think one example, a recent example I can think of is like Justin Bieber, for example. What was his last track? Is it called Yummy? Yeah, Yummy. That's, it's an okay pop track, but, the kind of video was a big proponent to it, or big part of it, because it then leads to all these kind of, fan versions and fan dance challenges. And again, we saw it with N.E.R.D with Lemon, with the Lemon kind of dance challenge stuff they did with that. And, that kind of then, spreads into the wider world of Instagram, and I was going to say Twitter, maybe not Twitter quite so much nowadays, but TikTok, for example. My kids just downloaded that recently, which which meant I had to download it to set up the kind of parent account. And I'm sat there flicking through that, wondering what is going on in the world as I flick through all these videos of people doing all these dance challenges and whatever it may be to kind of, you know, some of the latest songs by people who I have no idea who they are. It's maybe me just showing my age a little bit more here, but yeah, I think that's an important part of, you know, a kind of marketing strategy now. And like I say, it probably doesn't apply to Get Lucky itself, because it's not that kind of track. But I think it was just, yeah, it's just missing some of those components. You know, a video, even a really simplistic video, an official video made up of those promo things that they shot and done in a slightly more cohesive, interesting way, I think would have really helped it as well. Because, you know, we saw one of the promo slots is very similar to the you know, Lose Yourself to Dance. They're on a stage, they're wearing slightly different sequin jackets. I think they're wearing black ones in the Get Lucky video. And then you've also got another promo spot where they're kind of on a stage, silhouetted in front of a sunset, I think it is, or a sunrise, whatever it might be. And they're both very well shot, very slick. And I think even if an official video had been made out of that and other bits and pieces that had been shot on the day, I think that would have also wouldn't have helped the track necessarily. It didn't need help, but it would have, I think, added to it slightly.
Yeah,
maybe given it more appeal.
But it all, I mean, yeah, and I think so. But it's kind of funny too, the synchronicity with the song is Get Lucky, and they got lucky. You know, they really did get lucky. And it's one of those songs where I'm not much of a singer. I do like to sing more, you know, usually when those people are around. But Get Lucky is one of those songs where I find myself one snapping my finger and wanting to sing along. It's a very, very catchy karaoke song too.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And I think it has that. I haven't been to karaoke in a while, but that's one I might do. It's just one of those where it's, again, those high notes. I mean, that
I was going to say, can you hit those high notes?
No, and again, like, I don't know if Pharrell would have been able to, you know, a decade before, but you know, it shows how much his, because, you know, voices do mature, and it showed how much his voice has matured, and I think that was the significant thing of showing that Pharrell's more than a producer. He is a vocalist as well, and he's really channeled his inner Michael Jackson there. It's
quite funny because I know around this time he did an interview. I can't remember who it was with, but they were talking about him singing on tracks, and he's also always kind of said, like, he doesn't consider himself a singer, and he's kind of originally accidentally ended up doing all these kind of hooks where he will do the reference track for an artist, and they will like the way he's sung it, so they will keep him on it or make him redo it. But it was around this time when he was recording, or starting to record, some of the Girl album, and he'd employed, I think, 2 different vocal coaches, if I remember rightly. And I remember him saying, he had no interest necessarily in doing lots more vocal work. Whether that means putting out the Girl album or future albums, I don't know. But he was talking about he wasn't really interested in vocal stuff too much anymore, or at that time. But he'd been kind of coerced, maybe the word, to actually employ some vocal coaches and work on the vocals and kind of actually learn how to make it easier for himself. Because I think he's also always said, like, he's not a singer. He doesn't find it easy to be able to hit those high notes and be able to kind of get it perfect every time. So he was spending, I think, hours every day, if I remember rightly, with a couple of different vocal coaches around that time. And I think this is where it's really starting to show with these kinds of tracks. Yeah,
and I mean, and you get to just thinking of the Hidden Figures soundtrack, which is one of my favorite things he's put out in the past few years, of him singing on that. I mean, those songs, there's of course other singers on there, but very gospel. That also is a great example of how much his vocalization, singing talents have improved as well. And I think that he's, you know, got to a place where he enjoys it, and people enjoy him singing.
Yeah, definitely. I remember seeing him years ago with well, one of the many times I've seen him with N.E.R.D. And in those early shows, sort of first up until, I don't know, 2006, 2007 maybe, he would struggle in a lot of those shows. He would struggle on just from the touring and the kind of constant having to do that every other night. But you could also tell in certain songs he couldn't, doing it live, he really struggled to hit a lot of those notes. And you saw that after, or when kind of Frontin' came out, basically, when he would do that track, there were some days when he was really on form and he'd probably been rested and stuff, and he would be able to do it. But out of the kind of nearly, I think, 15 times I've seen him live now, I think the vast majority, when it comes to fronting, when it comes to those kind of falsetto type parts, that's when he goes quiet and puts the mic out to the audience, and lets them do the hard work for him. But as you say, in recent years, I think he's really been working on that area. I think he's realised that he's had to, essentially, to be able to keep making music, to be involved in the music the way he has been, to be able to record his own music when he wants to. And we kind of see that with, I was going to mention later on in the kind of bits and news and stuff that we've got, Letter to My Godfather, which got nominated for an Oscar last year. Was it last year? Yeah, last year. All the days and months blur into one at the moment. Yeah. But that's, there's obviously a lot of auto-tune encompassed in the vocals of that track, which he kind of chose to do, but I've still seen him do that track on numerous TV shows live, with different levels of auto-tune, on his vocals at that time. But you can still kind of really hear where he's worked on his voice, where he is still kind of reaching those high notes that, many years ago he either wouldn't be able to, or he would kind of just not do it, and he would let the backing track take over, or he would let somebody else take over for him.
Yeah, and I mean, both Happy and Good Lucky were the people saying, "We like your singing too," which maybe put some more pressure. But he's at the point in his career too where he doesn't really have to do anything. He doesn't really have to sing, but it's obvious that it's more now people enjoy it. Whereas before, he was often singing on tracks because they were pumping out, Neptunes were just pumping out productions, and they didn't have somebody all the time. They didn't, maybe Kelis wasn't available, or Vanessa Marquez or whatever, and so they wanted Pharrell, and it worked. And but now he's a solo artist, which I'm wondering how much that will change now that, and I'm pretty excited about that Pharrell and Chad are both back in the studio. Like they said, they locked themselves in the studio. That now the Neptunes are kind of coming back and reemerging, because they're always there, but they've pretty much been doing kind of their own thing the past few years. And so, are we going to see back to Pharrell being more of kind of a featured vocalist? Is he wanting to change it that way? I think that's kind of exciting. But I mean, you still have N.E.R.D, and it'd be interesting to see if they do another album. I mean, I really, really, really love the latest one, but that'll be interesting to see if that dips out or if that increases.
And that, if you have nothing else on Get Lucky, that segues perfectly into some of the news that I had lined up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Anything else for Get Lucky?
No.
All right, cool. Well, let's move on to some of the news then. And yeah, as you say, the Neptunes are back in the studio together. I'm not going to reel off everything they're working on at the moment. You can head over to theneptunes.org for a list of upcoming and ongoing projects for this year, and also everything they made last year. I'll put a link in the show notes for that. But yeah, we've seen them back in the studio recently with Missy, Megan Thee Stallion. I think those tracks have come out since. Ozuna, more Beck stuff, Justin Timberlake, Pusha T, Brandy and Ray J randomly, although he has worked with them in the past. Rihanna is in a studio with them, although when her album will come out, nobody knows. Tyga, not a fan myself, but I hear he's popular, and many other kind of people. So yes, the Neptunes are back. I do get the feeling amongst the kind of Neptunes Pharrell fan community, no, there's a lot of people that aren't, let's say, pleased isn't the right word, but aren't necessarily feeling a lot of the more recent Neptunes stuff. I, for one, I generally like a lot of the stuff that's come out in the last year or so that they've been working on. I think we have to sort of realise that, you know, it's no longer 2001, 2002. I think the Neptunes are never necessarily going to sound like that kind of classic time period. Their sound has evolved. They've evolved as people. Their styles and processes and influences have evolved. So we're seeing, you know, different stuff from them now. But I like the fact that they seem to be mixing it up this year a lot more. They're working with the likes of Missy and Justin Timberlake, you know, going back to some of the classic stuff, Pusha, Ray J, etc. But then also trying completely new stuff like the Beck stuff recently that Pharrell worked on, which I thought was really good. And I believe Chad will be working on as well going forward. So I'm really interested to see what they're going to put out this year with these kind of various artists.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's been long overdue. But in terms of I mean, that's something I've, you know, had discussions with, or arguments with certain fans, is that artists need to and do evolve, and these are lifelong artists. Especially now, neither of them is in it for the money. They're set that way. But yeah, they're not going to sound like they did before, and that's a lot. There's going to be fan base of all types of people. There's going to be Kanye and Timbaland fans who want him to sound like he used to, and that's not what artists do. They evolve. They, you know, Radiohead fans want what they were doing before, and it's not fair to expect, and it's not necessarily fair to ask, but I think people were really wanting them to be kind of merged rather than, I feel on a lot of stuff like N.E.R.D, and it's a lot of like, they almost have a telepathic sort of connection of that, you know, like you had with Clipse with Hell Hath No Fury. Like technically it was really more Pharrell with the Clipse in the studio, but it, you know, has both their names on it because they, you know, there's a vibing there, but actually having them do the magic in the studio, it's something that you can kind of tell the difference in. But yeah, to ask for them to just kind of go back. I mean, they have kind of these sort of nostalgia tracks, and I felt like the N.E.R.D album was a very good representation of sort of what they've already put out so far in terms of their style, but also moving forward, because you have to adapt as well. So yeah, I mean, and that's just, you know, some fans of any artist are never going to be pleased, but I'm always interested to see when they get in the studio with certain people. Like I feel like there's certain artists, when they get in the studio, they are advancing. Other artists, they are kind of there for those artists to back up kind of whatever they want to do. Like when Pharrell and Chad get Gwen Stefani, it's going to go in an interesting direction. It's going to go in a new direction. You know, when they get with Clipse and these artists where they really have this drive forward, it gets in really interesting areas. Some artists just want what they're doing, but a Neptune's version of. So I'm interested to see too who, if they're going to get with more type of Gwen Stefani's types or more new types who are going to want to say, I want to go out of the box. So that was something I was listening to Pharrell talking about when he's talking about, you know, working with Daft Punk. He's like, you know, I'm going for the out of box stuff. Like, if you're not out of the box, I don't want to be near you. I don't want to catch whatever you're catching. So, and I feel like that out of the box stuff happens beyond the pop stuff even more when Pharrell is with Chad. Like, they can kind of ramp up that weirdness. So I think that's the excitement too, because you know, they're both innovators, but I feel Chad has more of that interest in going beyond the pure pop aesthetic. So I'm really excited to see where they go with that.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I want to hear that slightly weird, out of the box stuff that we're not necessarily expecting, that isn't that kind of typical Neptune sound. And this is the kind of problem I have when I chat with other people. There is definitely stuff they put out that isn't to my taste, but that doesn't mean it's trash. Doesn't mean it's not any good. It's just it's not my thing. And I think a lot of fans have to kind of realise that as well. And I think that will tie into a lot of the kind of BBC IceCream stuff we talk about later as well, with some of the remake of IceCreams and things as well. We've got this, that real old school core loyal fan since day one that just wants the original stuff and wants nothing to change. And then you've got the other people that want to, let's say, embrace the change a little bit more and look forward to how things evolve and develop, and may not always be to your taste, but at least they're pushing things forward.
Yeah, and I think people also forget that one of the reasons Pharrell is a big inspiration to me as a person, as seeing on making music, is he says my success comes from other people. It comes from fans. It comes from people listening and buying our stuff. And so in the same way, they have to adapt to times. I was thinking about that in terms of actually Star Trek. There's a lot of Star Trek fans who don't like the new Trek, but you have to meet people where they are. You have a different audience. The audience was watching Star Trek, 30 years ago, is aging or is dying. You have a new audience of younger people who want something different. The Neptunes are making, they're not making, jazz music from, the 60s, although my fingers crossed they might do a jazz album as they promised years ago. But that the music they're making is for consumption of the major demographic, which is, 18 to 24, 18 to 34. They're not, they can't do this stuff for when I was 18 in 2003,
they can't do stuff for the old heads constantly. Yeah. As you say, there's a younger demographic. That's who they have to appeal to as well, because this is again what people forget is when they're producing tracks, they are producers. They are being paid to make a track for an artist, and that artist wants a return on that money they've paid, whether that's single sales or streams, whether that's video watches and money from the ad revenue, whether it's album sales, it doesn't matter. That there is it is a business essentially, and I think music means more to us than that, and more to most people than that. But that's kind of what you also have to remember. The Neptunes are not just Pharrell and Chad super producers. It is the Neptunes, which are a business and part of, as you mentioned earlier, Star Trak Entertainment, which is a company which has to pay people's salaries and has to make money. So there's that aspect. And I'm sure they don't go into any kind of session thinking they have to make a pop song which is going to blow up. But at the same time, as producers working for other people, I'm sure they have to, be diligent and what's the word I'm looking for? you know, they have to have the artist's best interests at heart, which I'm sure they do. And part of that has to be, you know, there has to be an end product which other people are going to enjoy as well and hopefully pay for, essentially.
Yeah, and I mean, people forget they drew in the Neptunes as a production duo because they couldn't, you know, back then they couldn't do it as a group. So, you know, we're getting, essentially we get an N.E.R.D album or a Pharrell album, you know, we're getting what they really want out. But when they're producing, Pharrell describes it, I don't know if you saw, he did an interview with Rick Rubin, which is really interesting because they're both incredible producers. I mean, Rick Rubin's a legend. And, you know, it was a really good kind of heady conversation, but, you know, him asking about, you know, when you go into the studio with somebody, you kind of know what you want. And, you know, Pharrell says sometimes sometimes when he's worked with certain people, he can take the ego hat off. Sometimes he takes it on in terms of, you know, pushing in kind of direction, but it depends on what they have going on. Sometimes he'll have something already that he's thought of, and then sometimes it's the artist is leading it. And then people forget that, you know, artists are everyone's got their own issues, everyone's got their own egos, and some of these artists are very specific about what they want, and it's different with, you know, you have producers like Danger Mouse, one of my favorite, who typically he, you know, says, I want to produce an album. I don't do songs. He does. But, you know, when you're producing songs, though, like the Neptunes or Timbaland, the artist is thinking, and their representative thinking, how is this going to fit within the album? Especially because now we're very much in an era, I feel, of that kind of albums that you have the songs, but it's not kind of like the 90s when you have all these different songs. You kind of, I feel like a lot of hip hop, especially, you're having a similar vibe throughout. So often it's them knowing, okay, what's the overall vibe of this album, and then how can we kind of mesh into that? So it's never going to be kind of what the fans want, as opposed to when, you know, but at the same time, people are coming to the Neptunes because they want the Neptune sound. And that's always going to be there. But I'm also interested in when they, you know, have someone's like, I want the Neptune sound, but I want what you guys are wanting to go in a direction of. And I think that's where you get the most interesting things. But, you know, fans are going to want different things. But yeah, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, they go in what the artist wants. And that's what's dictated, what the artist wants, what their representative wants. But you speaking of, I don't know if you remember the Clones album. I think they had in the Clones album, the liner notes, they feel like a jazz album was coming, and it never happened. But I think some of the tracks on N.E.R.D's Nothing album were kind of close. But I've been kind of crossing my fingers that maybe they'll take this time in the studio to, because both, I mean, especially Chad is like a jazz virtuoso, especially piano. So I'd be interested to see if they can come up with something like that, because I feel it doesn't happen enough.
Yeah, I'd love to see something. I'd love to see a Clones 2 album, but at the same time, I'd love to see just something completely weird and wonderful and out there, and almost like a passion project that they both kind of want to do in some way. I think that would be really cool. One little thing I did notice this week, and just this kind of loosely ties in. Obviously, everyone is stuck at home, but meetings still have to happen. And I saw a screen grab of a meeting of people from I Am Other and other places, and Chad's wife was on this kind of video call. I think her name was listed there in the thing. So it was her in one little box off to the side, but then kind of Chad was sat off to the side in the picture with her as well. And he had like a saxophone or a clarinet or something in his mouth. And that just kind of came across as like typical, slightly weird, slightly quirky Chad. Just, I can imagine him just constantly, no matter what people are trying to do, just always sat there with his saxophone or with a clarinet or some weird and wonderful instrument, just riffing constantly and making things up, and I hope that comes into fruition in some kind of way. I hope something comes of all of the stuff that he's been doing the last kind of few years when the Neptunes haven't necessarily been working that closely together.
Yeah.
And yeah, also talking of kind of new music, there was a new video from Ant Clemens featuring Pharrell for the track Aladdin that came out this week. You can find that on YouTube. I haven't watched it properly yet, but it depicts both of them in some kind of 8-bit computer game scenario. So I'll be giving that a watch this week. Have you managed to see that one yet?
I have not, no.
Okay, yeah, we'll check that out this week. I will leave a link in the show notes for that. Some other kind of related news. The Neptunes were inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame. I think it was the start of this year, maybe around January time. It may have been the end of last year. Obviously, well deserved, and great that they're kind of getting the recognition for all of the songs that they've kind of written and produced over the years. Obviously, the list is almost endless at this point. Again, I'll leave a link in the show notes to a video of Pharrell and Chad getting that kind of award. Other news that's happened, Tyler won the best Grammy ever. Won a Grammy for Best Rap Album, which is, I think, as he said at the time, I think a slightly ridiculous category these days. He gave a shout out to Pharrell. We briefly mentioned the Tyler album, I think, a couple of times on previous episodes. But a brilliant album, and if they get rid of some of these horrible stereotypical type categories, dated categories that they have, I think that album would have been up potentially for just best album of last year. While I'm not a Tyler fan, really, I like some of his stuff, I think that album was an absolutely brilliant album, brilliantly produced. You can definitely hear all of the kind of Neptunes, N.E.R.D, Pharrell influences in there as well. So congratulations to Tyler for that. We also had news about the Something in the Water festival that was announced. That was meant to be taking place May, I do believe, this year. There was going to be a separate set from Chad himself. Again, I have no idea and almost don't imagine what stuff he would have played in his own separate set. But I think the biggest news that was coming out of Something in the Water was a Clipse reunion. The Clipse were actually going to perform as a duo. They did state that this didn't mean this meant they weren't going to be formally getting back together, recording or anything, but they were going to be at the festival performing as the Clipse. That would have been amazing to have seen, but unfortunately, Something in the Water, along with pretty much every other festival for this spring and summer, has now been cancelled.
Yeah.
We have got a ton of BBC Adidas related stuff, so I'm going to reel off some of this stuff really quickly, and then we can get to any other stuff you've got at your end as well. Over at BBC, we have seen BBC Adidas Hebrew Brantley capsule release in the US. I think there was a Miami event that launched it. Pharrell was there, obviously Hebrew Brantley was there, a number of other people. Check that one out. We saw new Human Made and Star Trak merch. Star Trak merch released in Japan only at a pop-up store, which I think was around for a week or 2 weeks or something. Some really nice merch there. I was keen to get my hands on some of that stuff, but unfortunately couldn't. Big news from BBC EU. They are no longer just a standard offshoot of Billionaire Boys Club. They are now a luxury arm of BBC. You will probably have got that feeling over the last year or so if you shop at BBC EU at all, with the, let's say, slowly rising price of pretty much every item, but that is for good reason. That is because they are kind of obviously designing their own stuff. It is being, all the kind of materials are sourced and produced separately away from BBC US and not necessarily made in, let's say, cheaper places of manufacture. A lot of stuff is made in Japan for them. There's a lot of stuff done in as well in China and places like that. But it's definitely a more limited number of items, as I say, kind of independently designed, and will now be a complete luxury arm of the kind of BBC brand. We've seen some recent releases really proving that point. Some of the new Swarovski items on their new website, they've got t-shirts and hoodies with the kind of OG BBC Arch logo there. And I think the hoodies were 900 and something euros, t-shirts 300 and something euros. I think it's good that we're starting to see this more luxury, lux side of BBC kind of come back. Yeah, it's going to hurt in the pocket for some people that like to collect this stuff. But I think it's great that we've got a really good mixture now of BBC. You know, you've got the standard, almost standard BBC US stuff, the collaborations and stuff they're doing over there. You've got BBC Japan doing their own thing, essentially. Some great designs coming out of there. And then the EU, which has been doing great stuff for the last few years. They are completely relaunching IceCream. That's coming soon as well. I think that was kind of due to be towards the start of this summer, but that's now going to get pushed back just because of all the stuff going on in the world at the moment and delays coming out of China and stuff like that. So we should have some more news about that soon. But we will see an official relaunch of IceCream as I think, or I assume, as a kind of completely separate, standalone luxury brand, as it was kind of back in the day with the OG stuff. In terms of sneakers, we've got a bunch of sneaker stuff. We have the Adidas 4D Pharrell edition, which has been released. We've got new multicolored solar hues. We've got the crazy BYW 2.0s, more hue collection, so new Stan Smiths, Nisa Highs, SC Premiers, Continental 80s. We've got the new 0 to 60 statements, which are a slightly more futuristic take on the sort of BYW silhouette, with some crazy materials and iridescent colours, and they look like some crazy moon boot of some kind. Lots of new IceCream stuff, lots of BBC Kids stuff. I think the most, I'm not going to say controversial, but a couple of the releases that has caused the most talk, I think, in the kind of BBC IceCream community recently is the re-release of IceCreams. In partnership with Reebok, and obviously we saw these announced towards the end of last year, and then we saw some of them at ComplexCon. We saw the original Zig Kinetica BBC collaboration with the Starfield design. We saw the Iverson, the Answer 5s in a certain colourway. There are now 3 colourways. But we've also got the Reebok BB4000 and the BB4600, so a low and a mid in the diamond and dollar design, in the white colorway and the tan colorway. They've been released out to the public. I actually got a pair of the 4000s today, a tan colorway one, so the lows. I won't go into them in too much detail here. I'll probably save that for next week's podcast and probably talk about it in a bit more sort of detail then. But a whole lot of IceCreams, and also coming up, I think on Sunday or Monday, on the 5th of April, it is the 3rd, I guess we call it International IceCream Day. Take a picture of not just your IceCreams now, but also kind of, Pharrell related sneakers, accessories, clothing, whatever it is you've got. Put them on Instagram or Twitter. Tag at King of Creams. He wants to see all of your pictures. And make sure you use the hashtag We All Scream IceCreams with a Z at the end there. Looking forward to seeing some really interesting pictures. The last couple of years, we've seen everyone breaking out some of the classics, some of the things they've had stored away for years and years, breaking them out, undead stocking them, posting some pictures up, and it's really great to see everybody in the kind of community digging out their old ice creams and posting them up. I think that's pretty much everything I had. Clayton, anything else from yourself?
I wanted to talk a little bit about the clothing in terms of, I've been a Neptunes fan since the year 2000, and I was never too big into the fashion piece, but mostly that's because where I grew up in Denver, Colorado, there was no stores that sold anything ice cream or BBC related. But now I live in Portland. There's a store downtown called Compound, which actually sells BBC stuff. They're all Neptunes fans there. They've got some Bape stuff and some ice cream stuff. And so now I'm, for the first time, an owner of some BBC stuff. I got, one was a BBC jacket, kind of space jacket, which unfortunately got a little ripped. But they were kind of a special purpose, because usually when it comes to clothes, I buy used or I buy just generic label. But like I have a BBC poncho thing that probably spent too much money on, but it's cool. And at one point, a few years ago, I had bought from a guy, I used Star Trek jacket, which there's very few of those. And I think they're talked about putting those back out, but I don't know if it happened or if that has already happened. But one thing that occurred to me with the clothing is, how important that must be to Pharrell in terms of other revenue streams, because music's, granted, they're going to make money off of music, but they can't always guarantee it. So it's interesting how it's used as another form of self-expression. I remember meeting Pharrell 2004 after an N.E.R.D show. I'm rambling like a nerdy fan, and I remember asking him about ice creams, and there's an autograph table, and he just puts his foot up on the table. With this, that's kind of how he is. And I think the most interesting thing about BBC that I really like is the tagline is, wealth is of the heart and mind, not the pocket, which is an interesting contrast, because you have a clothing line that's pretty expensive.
I was going to say that I don't think the irony is lost on them, but it is quite ironic when you read that, and it's on a piece of clothing that has cost you an absolute small fortune as well. Yeah,
but and I mean at the same time, it's understanding that that's it's these collector's items and essentially for fans who can't afford it. I've seen some. It's hard for this would be the only kind of brand I can really say, I'm willing to spend $90 for a T-shirt, but it's because you're part of a club, I guess, that feels rich, that you kind of you discovered something, you're part of kind of a family, and I think that's kind of the point of I didn't know about the ice cream day, that because I know April 5th is Pharrell's birthday. But that's kind of cool. I think it's you kind of have that community, because it wasn't until really getting to Neptunes.org and kind of that fanship started meeting more people who are really, really into the clothing. Have strong opinions on clothing. I'm not too opinionated on fashion, other than I very much vibe with it. But now I started thinking more about shoes and such. Like right now, Portland, where I actually live in Beaverton, which is a suburb of Portland, and Nike World headquarters is here in Beaverton. You also have Adidas US headquarters. I've never been much of a shoe person, but now I have, because people have given me or bought used. I have more shoes than I ever have. So now I'm kind of thinking about that. There's another store downtown Portland that sells mostly used shoes, but they have Yeezys and they also have ice-creams there that are, I don't know if they've been slightly used, but yeah, you can get them. They're cheaper than their brand cost. I think they have some new ones. And that's, again, probably where I'd be willing to buy those. Because there's the two, I've seen more people at BBC that they're kind of conversation pieces. They're kind of saying, hey, at least I'm a Neptunes fan, I'm a Pharrell fan. And so there's sort of kind of uniforms, identifiers there. But that's only been something recently I kind of started thinking about. Outside of that, I don't really have too many opinions outside of the fashion piece, but I know it's a big part of that community.
Yeah, definitely. It's the newer stuff. People of my age or around my age, and us people in our 30s that were buying the stuff when it kind of first came out. I think a lot of people have kind of lost interest in it. You know, BBC went through a fairly awful period a number of years back where, they just kind of shares got sold. Pharrell wasn't really interested in it. He still isn't really now, to be honest, as far as I'm aware. But, they kind of gave out contracts to, every department store. Basically, anyone that asked for stock, anyone that asked for an account, they gave it out, and you could go and buy, BBC and ice-cream stuff, things for, sort of $20, $30 in places like TK Maxx and these kind of lower end stores. It really kind of hurt the brand. And I think since then, a lot of people haven't really been that interested in the brand, apart from, us sort of few that were sort of, buying the original stuff back in the day. But I think that's why it's good to see in recent years the company diversifying a little bit, the pop-up store in Miami doing slightly different stuff, letting the team in Japan do their own thing, letting the team in the EU do their own thing, and now kind of turning that more into a luxury high-end arm of the brand. And again, you look at the EU stuff and they're out there setting up their own record label, hosting events, doing all sorts of cool collaborations with artists and stuff like that. So it's starting to gain a bit more interest, and there is this kind of thing happening in, I hate the term streetwear, but in the streetwear world, let's say, because people know what I'm referring to, where the younger people now are looking back at those kind of original retro type items of the early 2000s. It's weird to say, items of the early 2000s are now considered, retro or vintage or whatever you want to call it. But there is that kind of appeal again for those old designs, and we're seeing that with BBC at the moment. They're starting to put out diamonds and dollars stuff again because they're kind of getting access to, I think, some of the prints and the licensing and stuff again, so they're able to kind of put out versions of the hoodies that were really popular 20 years ago. Japan are doing their own take on some of them with the fleeces and things like that. So there is this kind of resurgence for some of the OG stuff because younger people want that stuff, but I think that is causing, let's say, rumblings in the kind of collector community and people that I know and that I speak to as well. Some people don't like those kind of original classic designs being touched and being redone. They don't want to see these things retroed. I myself, similar to as we mentioned earlier, I'm keen to see the brand or brands go forward and try new things, and they're definitely trying lots of different new things. But at the same time, they are a business. They do need to pull from some of those classic designs and potentially reuse them where they see necessary or where they kind of really want to. So yeah, I don't mind a lot of this stuff kind of coming back out. And again, the ice creams I won't go too much into at the moment. I'll save that for next week. But again, while not everything is to everyone's taste, we have to realise that they have to try new things. They have to try and reboot old things if they think they'll work and they'll be popular again. And that's what happens in business, unfortunately. It's not always to everyone's taste.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, too, as I say, the other thing about the fashion, I never really was able to get, because at least back in the day, they weren't selling anything online. Like you can actually buy stuff online. And, I think there were only a few stores that sold BBC. But as I say, anybody who's in Oregon or come to Oregon, they want to buy from a shop, Compound. I don't have any financial stake. I just like to shout those out. The guys are cool. Compound, downtown Portland. And there's also the store Index that sells some, ice creams, pre-owned shoes. Now that you can get this stuff online, I feel that's I think significant part of it. I don't know. I haven't met anyone who's into BBC or iceCream who's not also a Pharrell fan, and I think that's pretty unique. I don't even think that's something maybe Yeezys have. I mean, I guess most people buying Yeezy stuff are Kanye fans, but maybe some of them aren't. I kind of was thinking of that. Probably why the price is up is because they're not selling so much to mass market. So it's for, it's like people who save up to buy, iPads or MacBooks. Though, some of them aren't, some of them I looking at kind of reasonably priced. But it's still kind of luxury items. But one other thing I wanted to bring up that was on my mind about Pharrell is, I don't know if it's talked about much, but I remember reading an article in Esquire a few years ago about it seems Pharrell has an interest in politics. And beyond being in entertainment, you see a lot of this from people who are well established in their careers, and I think you get to a certain extent. I wonder how much longer are Pharrell and Chad really do this, because I mean they're lifelong artists, but they also want to go in new directions. I mean, you have artists like John Legend and Jay-Z and Pharrell who have political aspirations, and I think it's just because it's one of those things you're not supposed to really talk about, but I've kind of been curious about now that we have the presidents of our celebrity president, who's lowered the bar significantly, but it has that set of precedents for people who are politically oriented. I mean, you have Kanye, of course, doing his thing, but I don't know. Is that something you've thought about or touched on? Because it's something I think he touches on in his songs, and I see him. He's got promotions and stuff where he's very critical, and you have that in the N.E.R.D album about talking about police brutality. How might that change things? Would the fan base get behind that if Pharrell decided to run for office or wanted to be involved in that way?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's always an area that I've always thought, if I got the chance to sort of interview him, that's an area I'd like to kind of talk about. The problem is with Pharrell, how do I phrase it? He's quite guarded, and he's very safe in what he says nowadays. Him as a brand is very, very important to himself and the work that he does. So, you will very rarely ever hear him say anything particularly controversial, which is why I was very surprised when he did the interview with Rick Rubin. He kind of almost out of nowhere started talking about the Blurred Lines case and really going into it. And I think, as I mentioned in a previous podcast, you could see that it was something that had been bothering him for a long time, and I've not seen him that kind of animated or really into something or annoyed at something as that in many, many years. But in terms of the kind of the politics stuff, he did fundraising for Obama back in the day. He's kind of endorsed Obama. I believe he does what's the thing you have in the US when it's the elections, the thing to go out and vote that they all the kind of celebrities promote and encourage people to go and vote. Basically, he's been involved in that. I've seen in the past. Whether he would actually get involved in politics, I don't think he would. I think he likes to be able to kind of have his say through his music, which, as you mentioned, we hear in pretty much all of the N.E.R.D albums. They're all you could go through all of those albums and pick out a number of kind of political songs from each album. But I don't think he would ever really overly attest to them being specifically political. I think he would say, well, you can read into it what you want to read into it and interpret it in whichever way you want to interpret it. But I think when you do listen to it, yes, you can obviously hear they are political. I don't think he would ever really go into politics again. I think him as a brand is too important to him. I don't think he likes the kind of controversy that you potentially get as president, or the kind of negative side of it all, or well, not just president, but any kind of political position, let's say. But I think as he gets older, whether he kind of continues as much with the music or not, I don't know. But you already see him at the moment working in these areas where it will lead to kind of political involvement. So you look at the Something in the Water Festival and the kind of regeneration of some of Virginia Beach. You look at the complex building he was recently involved in as I think as more of an investor and a face for the marketing in Canada. Was it Toronto? I think it was in something like that. And he's been talking about other regenerating housing projects and making affordable housing for low-income families and stuff like that. I think, if he were to want to be involved in kind of politics in any way, he would do it in that way, where I think he could actually make a direct change by using his own kind of, I guess, status and brand to influence the right people at the right times and get things through that actually directly make a difference to people's lives, as opposed to any kind of political position that would involve sitting in an office and having to deal with I was going to say idiots, other politicians on a regular basis, which is one in the same thing essentially, at least to me. I don't think he would want to kind of do that. I don't think he would need to do that. I think any kind of political aspirations he may have, would come from more of the kind of influence side of things, and having that status, and again that kind of the links and contacts in the various industries to actually get stuff done, as opposed to being somebody that has to lobby for things and deal with the kind of the weird and wonderful, weird and atrocious world of what politics actually is on a day-to-day basis. One question
I had for you that I haven't talked to many fans about is this. I think it happened last year. Pharrell recorded a song and I think put it in a time capsule that'll be released 100 years from now. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on that? What do you think that might be? Why he might have done that?
I don't know, but with Pharrell, I think it could depend on just what day of the week it is, what mood he's in. There could just be an amazing piece of music in there. Something that, you know, he wants people in the future to discover and listen to and take in and interpret in whatever way they want. But just, you know, some kind of brilliantly produced or written piece of music. But as you say, at the same time, because of the kind of political times we are in now, especially, you know, you people over in the US, yes, that there could well be something in there that is more personal to him, that is more, let's say, N.E.R.D like, that is actually possibly expressing his opinion in some way. But again, I think with him, it could be one extreme or the other, and it could very much depend on, his mood at that point in time. So who knows? Yeah,
and that's one thing I love especially about the songs he writes that are personal. The last N.E.R.D album is, some of those lyrics are very mysterious. They've always got layers to them. Some of these songs, like some songs in there and some songs on In My Mind, I feel like some of them are written to a specific person or people that we maybe don't know. But it's kind of like he says, I love when songwriters are able to take that break and write stuff that can be interpreted in so many ways. But I think it's maybe he's undervalued as very much an inspiration beyond just an artist to a lot of young people. I think you know, he tries to keep himself humble in that way, but he's taken certain stances that are controversial, and especially, you know, being a member of Black community, his takes on police brutality, you know, coming out in support of the LGBTQ community, kind of holding responsible some other members of the arts who kind of come out with such, you know, prejudicial things, and being able to kind of navigate that very peacefully of, you know, people saying, oh, you know, what the hell is going on with Kanye, and kind of the hatred that goes to Kanye, and saying, well, you know, we don't turn on somebody just because we disagree with them politically. So he's got very much a potential for going beyond being this artist who's political in terms of being sort of a diplomat in some ways. Whether he would get involved in a official capacity in the government, I don't know. Of course, things are changing all the time, but I think it's interesting how he's used his platform for good in that way, and it's kind of inspired me. Because a lot of people can use their fame for not so good purposes, or just to put more back on themselves. And so I think it's something I always kind of looked up to, him being sort of a role model in that way. Is he's someone who really wants to use his position more than just to make money, more than just to make hits. He wants to make a stance and move society forward. I think that was kind of really declared on, especially the Hidden Figures soundtrack, and there's these big overarching themes on the N.E.R.D album. So I'm interested to see how that evolves, or if it stays the same.
Yeah, and even on the last N.E.R.D album, there's obviously the overtly let's say kind of political views and expression of views within the songs from him and from Kendrick and whoever else is on the album. But then there's also the kind of the complete opposite side of that, where, and I think I might have mentioned this on one of the previous episodes, but I know it's not a very well-known fact, and I can't remember who the interview originally came from, or where the quotes originally came from. It might have been Mike Larson, but apologies if I'm completely wrong there. But around the time of recording the album, this is when we had, well, I say we, not we whatsoever, because I'm not involved in this and I can't relate to it whatsoever. But when a lot of there were a lot of wrongful deaths, let's say, in the US at the hands of police officers, and obviously the predominant they were predominantly black men basically, and obviously this was something that was resonating obviously in the US and around the world with Black Lives Matters and stuff like that. And I know kind of Pharrell spoke generally around this, but what he wanted to do, he wanted to help these families who were in ongoing lawsuits with police departments, but he didn't want to do it overtly. He didn't want to draw attention to, in a negative way, to what was kind of happening. So, he took samples of the families when they were in court. I assume testifying against police officers, police departments, whoever it may be. He took samples of them in court and chopped them up so much that they were completely indistinguishable. And he used those sounds in the album itself, throughout the album, that last N.E.R.D. album, which meant he would then have to pay them, either a one-off fee to use that, or he would have to pay them royalties because their audio, their voice was in the tracks. And that's what he did. He paid them money to help them with legal fees, or just getting by in life, whatever they needed to use the money for. But obviously that isn't a well-known thing, and if you look through the notes of the album, you won't see those samples listed in there or anything. So that's something he's done completely the complete opposite, to him actually speaking on records and actually giving his opinion. He's doing a lot of this kind of stuff under the table as well to, not, like I say, not draw attention, I guess, to him and not draw any kind of negative attention to it in any way. He wants to just help these people, and that's his kind of way of doing it, whereby he feels. He's not just giving money away. He has used something of theirs, and therefore he's obliged to, to pay them compensation for that. But that's his way of actually, giving back to them, which, I think is an amazing thing, completely amazing. And the fact he did that on the last album, for all we know, he could have been doing that for years and years for many other causes. We don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's something that he does, semi-regularly, let's say. Yeah,
and I actually didn't know that. It's interesting. I mean, I think I looked at briefly some of the samples that are on there, but I didn't know the origin of them. That makes sense. And it's like many artists and actors do a lot of these philanthropical charity things. The cynics will say, oh, well, they're doing it for tax breaks, but that's only true for there's truth to that. But of course, you have people like Brad Pitt, who was building houses after Katrina, which no one really knew about until Spike Lee kind of shed light on it. And I think that goes with his character of it's you have some of these rappers too who will just like go make a name for themselves or make a scene throwing out money. And of course it's videoed and people are critical of that, but then it's like you can't win too as a famous person. People are like, oh, well, you're not doing anything with your money. Good. It's like, well, I am. It's like, oh, well, now you're open about it. And so I think he's taken the flow state there of not trying to make it about him.
Exactly. And I think that's why he's kind of, also done it in this way where he's not just donated money to people. He's kind of taken these audio clips or whatever it might be. You could probably break down every track on there to every different audio track within each song, and you would never find those samples because they're so chopped up, so just mixed in and distorted and turned into completely different sounds. But that's kind of his way of actually, I guess, justifying it to a certain extent. So it's not just like I'm just giving money away because I want to be a good person. It's I've used this thing, therefore I owe these people, I owe them something, and this is my way of kind of repaying them and therefore helping them to move their lives forward in some way.
Yeah, and that's right in line with his philosophy that like when he goes out, he's going to sign what the fans want. I mean, when I had met him, it was very stark that he's there. He's very kind, very generous. He's there for his fans, to put them up. And not a lot of entertainers, I think most of them do, but I think a lot of people don't see it that way. There's a sense of some people, just people in general, have a sense of entitlement, but he doesn't carry that around because he could still be wailing in the studio and no one listens to him. But he knows because people listen to him, and there's people, people he obviously feels are family on some level. So, I didn't know that's pretty cool, and I didn't know how kind of integrated that would be, aside from the Mad Ethnic, whatever sample that's kind of going on, which I was curious how involved was Chad in that album, because I don't remember seeing much in terms of his credits in there.
No, it's a slightly strange situation, and I've asked the question of a couple of people that worked on the album and haven't got a definitive answer. So obviously when the album came out, basically the album was listed as produced and written by Pharrell. That was it. Every track was produced by Pharrell, written by Pharrell. No one else listed whatsoever. I think they have updated some of the credits to include other people now, but I don't know what was going on. I don't know if that's a contractual issue or there's something else going on there. I wouldn't kind of like to sort of speculate in any kind of way, but that's something I noticed immediately when the album came out. It was an N.E.R.D album. Chad was meant to have been very involved in the sessions. Shay was generally involved. You had lots of other kind of writers involved there at the time, but the whole album was just listed as produced and written by Pharrell, and that was it. So it's a strange one, definitely, and like I say, I don't quite know why that is. I'd like to give them the benefit of the doubt and think it's a not a negative thing, and it is just maybe some kind of contractual issue or whatever it might be, and there's nothing nefarious going on there or anything, but who's to say?
I remember looking up the credits, and there was Pharrell, and then there was also one of the contributors it looks like a name that was in another language. And I don't know if that was just an online thing or if that was a moniker for Chad, but that's what I remember looking up, because it was kind of like, who are these other people? And I mean, when they have actual other people on the tracks, and they have those, but I'm not sure on that. I know I enjoy it, but it could be maybe just this is something that they're not, the N.E.R.D albums have never been something where they're expecting that to be huge. They're not these huge albums. They're more passion projects. So maybe it played into that, but that is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and music contracts are strange things at the best of times, and I don't know whether he had some contractual issue with his label whereby he had to give them another X number of tracks to be able to change his deal, get out of a deal, do something else, and potentially the album was forwarded as written and produced just by him, so it could fulfill some contractual obligation maybe. I'm not too sure, but like I say, I'd like to think that that probably was the case. It was just something silly like that, because I know they have, if you look at the credits now, most places, other people are listed as being writers, and I think Chad appears a few times on there at least, and the other contributors are listed. I know when I looked up some stuff the other day, I know kind of Brent was listed on there. With, he plays the guitars on every track that's got guitars on there. He's now listed on there, and so it's been updated. So like I say, yeah, I assume it was an admin or clerical type thing that had to be that way for a certain period of time, perhaps.
Yeah. I also wanted to bring up, I don't like to do gossip, but it was interesting. I wanted to get your takes on, so this was last year, the 20th anniversary of Kelis' Kaleidoscope. And I was also really happy to see they finally put Wanderlust. I can't remember the name of the album. Yeah, of Kelis, which was one of my favorites. Now that's on streaming, which for a long time, you had to order the CD separate. I had to order it from the UK. But that Kelis came out with an article in which she was basically not too happy with the Neptunes. Pharrell, I think what I got was there was underlying personal issues there, but kind of that was an interesting thing to see, simply because I mean she was on a great deal of tracks from other artists and featured, and it seems like all these years she's coming out and she's kind of mad and kind of accusing, Pharrell being fake and all this. And I think that was, it seems like, I don't know if you have any takes on that. It seemed like she was just trying to maybe raise her profile or something.
I have quite a lot of takes on this, and I have to be careful what I say here, because I've been speaking to her team recently. I was trying to secure an interview when I went to see her in Berlin a few weeks ago, and I'm assuming the festival that she's meant to be attending here in Finland in July or June, whenever it is probably going to be cancelled now. But I was hoping to push the interview to then. So for those that aren't aware, Kelis recently started to do a Kaleidoscope 20th anniversary tour. She did 3 dates, one of which was Berlin that I went to a few weeks ago, and obviously it then got cancelled because of what's going on in the world at the moment. But during her kind of promo for this tour, she talked, let's say disparagingly about Pharrell. The problem here is I don't necessarily think Pharrell was specifically the problem, but what the problem Pharrell has is that since he's been in the industry, since he's had Star Trak, and since they've been the Neptunes, he has been the face and the voice of the Neptunes and of Star Trak, and of everything else he's been involved in. So when people talk about, when Kelis or a journalist talks about her deal with Star Trak from 20 odd years ago, or from 1998, 1999, whatever it was, they refer to Star Trak, the label, and the Neptunes as Pharrell, because he was the face and voice, and it's an easy way for journalists to refer to it because people then understand his involvement, and it's I think a quick and easy way for Kelis to refer to it, because it will get clicks, it gets promotion for the tour, it gets it throws a bit of shade his way, because she's obviously still pissed off about how things kind of went down. But I don't think the issue is around Pharrell whatsoever, essentially. You look back at the Star Trak days, and from my very limited knowledge and understanding of the people that were there at the time, Pharrell and Chad had nothing really to do with the running of Star Trak. It was their label. Pharrell was obviously the face of it. But the day-to-day stuff, the managing of contracts, the artist management, whatever it might be, that's not Pharrell's job. Pharrell owns the company. He's a producer in the Neptunes. From my understanding, all of that kind of contract stuff was managed by their business partner, Rob Walker, who kind of co-founded Star Trak with them. But obviously, if a journalist says, oh, so the stuff that happened at Star Trak and the stuff with that Rob looked after and all of this, 99.999% of the people out there don't know who Rob Walker is. Don't even know what Star Trak is if they're just reading The Guardian or whatever publication it was in. But they know who Pharrell is. They know who Pharrell Williams is, and they know, oh, okay, so he had a label and she was on his label. Okay, now I understand it. But if you're talking at a higher level about Star Trak and Rob Walker and other people that worked there, most people don't know who that is. They don't care who it is. So it doesn't benefit either the journalist or Kelis to talk about those actual specifics. It benefits them more to talk in general terms about the person who was the face and the voice of the company at the time. Now that's just my kind of take on it. I know kind of Pharrell has, well, at least I think Pharrell has kind of reached out to her in the past, and they've seen each other at events and stuff like that, and they've been kind of cordial and friendly. Obviously, Kelis still has an issue of some kind, which obviously hasn't been worked out or resolved, and she obviously still feels sort of hard done by, sort of 22 years later. Obviously none of us are kind of privy to that sort of to the kind of background knowledge and information of exactly what went down and who exactly was involved in what and what was agreed and what wasn't. But my take is, Pharrell's name was used as a means essentially to generate the clicks for the story and to also, help promote the tour a little bit more, let's say.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I got at. I used to work as a journalist, as a reporter for years, including for mainstream publications, and I, fortunately, I've covered some stories involving the media. But I was never really never one to get a celebrity gossip or anything like that. But in terms of how I know how newspapers and news organizations work, there's to be leading questions, and there are always a tendency to want to get that. I mean, I'm a big fan of Fiona Apple and her recent article that's kind of preceding her new album. What people took away, what got most taken away from that article outside of what was about her new album was a story about, her doing cocaine with Quentin Tarantino and Paul Thomas Anderson. And that was the big takeaway because people glob on to the gossip. I've always shied away from it sometimes to the point where I didn't know till I think 2012 that Pharrell had a son, Rocket. And I think I found Rocket because I just try to stay away from all of that so much. Now I just kind of more judicious about how I see, knowing that none of that is what it seems. But I was kind of just wondering if that's issues. That's kind of the first time I knew she kind of still has issues. But I didn't know if that was issues she was having or just for kind of how things are kind of chopped up. Because I think, later in the article, she clarifies, she's obviously got some personal issues with Pharrell that probably no one else will ever know about. But also some, where she's kind of phrased, it wasn't really them. It was more the business. But it seems kind of what you're saying. It gets the numbers up. It gets the stuff out. But just kind of all those things and kind of the blurred line lawsuit have made me kind of aware of how much I want to be involved, in the industry or carve my own way out, because you can get that cutthroat stuff. I mean, the blurred lines thing is just, I think it's absurd to set the precedence that anyone can be sued for just having a certain vibe. But I think it just goes to show you, the bigger you get, the more likely people are going to want to either, Mr. Me Too, brag about knowing you, or want to throw shade your way. I think the police thing maybe we'll never know, but I just wanted to get your take on that, because that struck me as something that was kind of new to me.
Yeah, and I think once that first sort of story came out, I think it was The Guardian it was in. The next couple of interviews obviously just focused on that, and it turned the whole kind of promotion for the tour into a very negative thing. And she talked about how she wasn't she didn't realise it was 20 years. Someone had to remind her it was 20 years. She wasn't that bothered about the album. She didn't really care about it that much. It turned into like a real kind of like negative event, as opposed to like what you'd expect most people to be saying on a 20th anniversary tour. Like, yes, I'm really excited to perform these songs all over again and revisit them and rework them and see all the fans and all this kind of thing. It turned into a very negative like press tour. And I think, when I was speaking to her team to try and get an interview, she did a couple more interviews. I think she did one with Radio 1 in London. From what I gather, they were told not to touch on these subjects, to avoid them, let's say, and to talk about positive things. And I feel that, like the interview request that I had probably didn't go anywhere eventually, because they maybe had the feeling that, being a Pharrell Neptunes focused podcast, it would probably go down that route. There would be questions around some of the stuff she'd said, and I don't think they wanted any more kind of negativity, let's say, on that kind of initial short press tour that she did before the tour started.
Yeah, which is interesting, because I'm sure she has mixed feelings, but she wouldn't have a career without that. And I think that's where it came up with her album Tasty, which was the first album where she really had other songs produced by other people, which I think was good. But her career her notoriety seemed to trail off after that, because people were like, oh, she's not working the Neptunes, even though she's a quality artist. But it seems that that kind of maybe backfired on her a little bit, because it is sort of weird things to say when you're touring with an album that was produced by the Neptunes, but you also have issues with the Neptunes. Yeah, she could have taken time to clear it up, but it's like, it's kind of interesting. It hasn't really changed my opinion of her music, but it's just kind of like, okay, this is kind of one of the downsides to that business that I don't think a lot of people see. And then I see stuff online where people are like, oh yeah, criticizing people or Pharrell or Chad stans. It's like, well, I'm a fan, I'm not a stan. I don't understand anybody that they can't be infallible. But I thought that was just kind of interesting of, I guess maybe just because, Malice and Pusha are family, so, basically that they wouldn't go to that length. But I did want to ask you briefly, the Clipse, I saw a few years ago that they were thinking about going back in the studio. Is there, I'm guessing, are Pusha and Malice still close? Is there a reason they haven't want to go back? Besides, I guess, Malice, has become a preacher, become Christian. Maybe that there's not a vibe there on what they would rap about, but I think I
think that's it. Yeah, I think they're both in just different worlds nowadays. Obviously, we saw them, I guess, reunite recently on the Kanye album on what was a very good track. But yeah, they've obviously both said recently, that they're not really interested in doing it. I know both of them. I know Pusha has probably spoken about it more. He gets asked about it more. He's in the public eye a little bit more. He's always said, I'm not going to rule it out, but we're definitely in no rush to do it, and we don't have anything planned, basically. And yeah, I think that is because Malice, or No Malice now, as he's called, is in a completely different space in his life, completely different world. He is that kind of born again Christian. He doesn't want to do those songs. He sees, again, from his book that I read and interviews that I've read and stuff like that, and shared a couple of emails with him in the past as well, about, jumping on this podcast maybe one day. He's just not interested in those songs, not interested in that lifestyle. He wants to forget about all that stuff. I think it brings back bad memories, perhaps. He doesn't want to talk about it on a podcast or anywhere else. He's certainly not going to want to get up on stage and recite the lyrics about drugs, guns, killing people. Not that he did that, but some of the content is based around some of that stuff. He's just not interested in it, basically. I think we will see them do more stuff in the future. I think for the foreseeable future, it will be stuff such as they've just done with Kanye. It'll be both of them linking on a track, probably not necessarily, in the studio together. They'll, both send in their verses. And I think that will be the case for this foreseeable future. But I'd like to think eventually down the road there will be some, as they both get older, there will be some middle ground there somewhere, some agreements they can kind of come to in terms of what the theme of the album is, what the content of the album will be, and they'll be able to do something together, I hope. Because as I say, the Something in the Water Festival, there were some really big headline acts at that this year. But all the buzz I saw from fans, from publications, from everywhere was, oh shit, the Clipse are back together. That's all anyone seemed to care about. So, they know it's there. They know they can, and I think they've talked about it in the past. They regularly get offered obscene amounts of money to actually do shows together, to record stuff together. And they could earn an absolute ton of money off of that. And I think Pusha was saying a couple of years back, they'd been offered some absolutely obscene deal to go on tour again. And Mal was just like, no, don't need the money. Don't want to do it, thanks. And that's just, that's the way it's going to be for the time being, I think. Okay. And I think, there's Something in the Water Festival. I think, again, that would have been a one-off just because I think Pharrell would probably put a word in personally and ask them, will you guys do it for my festival, for Virginia, where we're from? And, they were doing it for that reason. But I don't expect to see too much more of the pair of them together in the coming years.
Yeah, that's kind of the feeling I got too, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, with artists I love, I want them to be happy in their personal lives, even if that means they don't record, anything again. So
yeah, I just quickly want to mention something I completely forgot about. I was going to talk about the Kelis tour a while back, and we touched on it a moment ago. But I needed to give a shout out quickly to Marvin Chalupa, who is a friend of the podcast, a listener of the podcast. He lives in southern Germany somewhere. He took like a 6-hour train up to Berlin to come and meet me and to go to the gig with me. So I want to give a shout out to Marvin. Also, if you're looking for early BBC gear, go and check him out on Instagram. I'll put a link in the show notes to his page. He's regularly selling loads of early pieces, lots of heat, lots of OG pieces, lots of ice creams, all that sort of stuff. So definitely give him a follow and keep an eye on his Instagram as well. And I was meant to mention it in the last podcast, I forgot. And I forgot earlier today as well. So there it is.
All right.
All right. Have we got anything else to talk about, or is that our lot?
That's my lot.
All right. Good stuff. We've gone, I did say at the start of this, we keep it to about an hour, but I think we've gone slightly over that. Not that that's a bad thing. But we had a lot to discuss, a lot to chat about. We've been away for a while, so good to chat about all these things, N.E.R.D, Neptunes and Pharrell. If you want to listen to the other episodes of the podcast, you can find us on pretty much every podcast app out there, as well as Spotify. Just look up the Otherz podcast. You can also stream all of the episodes from the website, theotherz.net. That's Otherz with a Z. And you can find the podcast on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook at Otherz Podcast. You can find me online at Steve R. Penny. And Clayton, let the people know what you're up to and where people can find your good self.
So yeah, I'm on Twitter and Instagram as DJ Scarpi, DJSCARPI, and I just started making music my own last year. You can find my music on all streaming, SCARPI, like N.E.R.D, as well as djscarpi.bandcamp.com. If you go to my Twitter page, DJ Scarpi, you can find the link tree, all the little links. But yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Great stuff. I'll add all the links to the show notes so people can find that nice and easily. But yes, I think that's it from us this week. I'll hopefully be back next week and the following week. We've got a few more episodes lined up. Time to be productive now that we're all stuck in the house every day. So yes, everyone stay safe, stay away from people, do all the stuff you're told to do, and yeah, call it a day there, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye-bye.